Hi artists, today we're back in the studio and we're going to do my favorite spring project. I think people who've been with me for a few years know I do this every spring, one way or another. We're going to make Japanese cherry blossoms. You're going to need some paper and a set of the pan watercolors, those kind that they sell every year in Walmart that almost everybody seems to buy. Those are fine, and just the normal brush that comes with it. I'm going to be using kind of this basic set myself. Now, of course, if you own better watercolors and better brushes and better paper, use that. But I'm trying to use things that people have around their homes anyway, so you don't have to leave your house. Okay, let's go to the studio. So what I'm going to need is my paints, my water, the standard paintbrush, and a straw. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the lightest blue I can, and I'm going to add plenty of water into the pan. I'm also now going to add plenty of water to my paper. Well, I say plenty of water, just enough to make it slide. I don't really want pools of water on my paper, but I do want it to easily slide. And today I'm working in diagonals. I'm going kind of side to side at an angle, instead of back and forth that way. It's mainly just because I like the way it looks. But you can do whatever you like. If you'd rather go back and forth, you certainly can get a good background that way. Whenever it stops moving easily, that's when I know it's time to add more water to my brush. So I'm wanting this background to be fairly light because I really want the cherry blossoms to be the absolute star of the show. I also need to be sure to watch the paper. If I'm using an art paper, I can get away with a little bit more of returning to somewhere I've been before. But if it's like copy paper out of your printer, you're not going to be able to do as much of that. And so just kind of keep an eye on it. You're looking for little places where the paper is starting to scrub up and make dots. You don't really want that. Okay. All right, so I just like the look of that. I think it's fun to have it kind of streaking back and forth at an angle. Now I'm going to have to let this dry before I can do the next step. So I'm going to set this aside and I'll come back as soon as it's dry. If your mom and dad will let you borrow a blow dryer, you can use a blow dryer if you want to speed up the drying time. All right, see you in a minute. I'm back now, and now's the time for the fun part. I've got my straw ready, and it could be really any kind of straw. I've got one of those permanent plastic straws. You could have a straw that you saved maybe from a restaurant. Even those little coffee stir sticks, those little red ones, those will be just fine too if that's what you've got. And if you have no straw at all, you could just paint these lines as well. You won't quite get the same look, but you can get pretty close. I'm going to add a lot of water to my black and a lot of water to my brush. And I'm going to think about buttons. I'm going to think about if this was a shirt and I was painting 3 buttons. And I'm going to put 3 juicy dot buttons. And these are really, really wet. And they've got a lot of paint and they're sticking up quite a bit off the page. Kind of like if a fat raindrop fell. So I've got those ready to go. I think I'll put one even closer down. Maybe one more here. I got more buttons than I thought. And I'm going to go behind it. I'm going to make sure my straw doesn't touch the paper and it's always behind. And I'm going to gently blow through the straw. And I'm going to kind of chase the dot wherever it's choosing to go. Ah, that worked pretty well. I'm going to add another black dot, about right here. And I think maybe I could use another one, maybe there. Okay. I'm looking at this and I maybe think maybe one there might be nice. And that one's mainly water, so I'm going to try to add some more paint into it. All right. Okay, now I'm going to add a couple dots over here. All right, I like that. I think that's about ready to go. So now I'm going to turn this around. So I've got it like that. And I'm going to rinse out my brush. In fact, this rinse water is getting pretty black. And so what I'm going to do now is go get a fresh cup of water. All right, so what I'm going to do on my practice paper, I'm going to practice this first. I'm going to go into my red. And I'm going to load the brush pretty thick with paint. And I mean, it's a very juicy brush. And I'm not actually going to paint this when I go ahead onto my final sheet, but I'm going to show you, I'm imagining a dot. So I'm going to paint that dot from my imagination. And I'm going to lay the tip of the paintbrush on top of that dot and press down. And now I've got my first petal. And I'm going to reload my brush. I'm going to set the tip of that ferrule, that's what that's called, that little gold edge. I'm going to set it on the dot again and press down and lift up. And I'm going to keep kind of going like I'm going around on a clock. Well, I guess I'm going counterclockwise. Doing that over and over so that this is always touching that center dot. Okay, I've got my first beginning of a cherry blossom. So what I want to do now is I want to begin to add that into my final paper. So I am going to go ahead and begin. So cheerful. I noticed a little bit of the black paint got into my blossom. I actually like that because it's creating a shade. When you add black to a color, you've got its shade. And this is the kind of piece that having a little bit of that shade, that dark red, will actually be pretty welcome in the artwork. Okay, there's my next cherry blossom. And I'm just looking for nice areas where I think that would be really rather pretty to hold a blossom. Now I like to imagine the dot, but if you're having trouble, you could always paint your dot. There's nothing wrong with painting the dot. And sometimes just to kind of get the paint where I want it, I roll my brush just a little bit. nice one here. I want my color to be fairly bright and vivid. Strong, that's the best word. I want my color to be strong. So I'm making sure I've got a lot more paint than water on my brush. Okay, I'm liking that so far. And if you've got it, maybe a little pink or red in your palette, you could paint in a little bit. I'll drop in a little pink here and there. So I'm just kind of taking my paintbrush and adding a little bit of pink. You don't have pink, that's okay. Now I'm going to paint in kind of a little bud here. Maybe one that just hasn't quite opened yet. It's kind of a little leaf shape. Maybe another one over here. And I think what I need is one more flower. Artists often like to think in odd numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4 is an even number. And I think I'd like an odd number just to make it interesting. So I'm going to create one more. I've got kind of a mixture now of pink and red on my brush. I like that quite a bit. I know I'm bumping into the other one, but that's okay. Okay, so now I really need to let this dry a bit, and we'll come back in a moment. I'm going to rinse my brush. Never leave your brushes in the water. By the way, once you've given them a good rinse, lay them flat. All right, see you in a moment. For our last step, you'll need something black. A black crayon, a black oil pastel, even a black pen. I'm going to be using my black ultra fine Sharpie. And we're going to be drawing in, I think, what's called the anthers. And they're the little parts, I think, that produce the pollen, the parts that bees like. And it's very small. Something like that. So I'm going to go in now. And add a few of those to each of my blossoms. Okay, so over here where I've overlapped, what I really want to do is see if I can trick the eye into seeing one over the other. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in with my paintbrush. And this one is just a little more highly pigmented there. And I'm going to, with just the tip and not much water at all, I'm going to see if I can kind of put a defining line there. And just make that petal a little stronger than the other. Okay, now it didn't work out perfectly, but that's okay. I still think it's a pretty little bunch of cherry blossoms. And when you're finished and it's all dry, of course you want to sign your work. Always sign it somewhere where it doesn't draw attention. I think I'll sign it very small along the branch. And then if you happen to have a frame or could cut a frame out of construction paper, you could put that on your fridge. Make everybody in your house happy. All right, you all have a lovely day, and I'll see you next week.